Good morning, shooters. So you can see there, we got a new revolver. That's the Taurus Raging Bull in 454 Casull. I've always wanted a 454 Casull firearm, and I figured why not get a big iron that shoots it. So I got that. So I'm going to do a video on the specifics of reloading the 454 Casull. There's a couple of videos out there, and they're not bad, but I wanted just to go into more detail about reloading specific to the 454 Casull. It is sort of the same as reloading anything else, but there's a few more considerations. You're not just hopping on and going through and doing 300 rounds of 5.56. It's just a little bit different than your other cartridges. So I'll touch on some of those briefly, and then later in the video I'll go into it more in depth. Even if you get brand new brass straight from the factory, you still want to resize it. Okay, you want to make sure you get the proper case neck dimensions by resizing it. When you're getting dies, you want to get 454 Casull dies. Don't get combination 45 long Colt 454 Casull dies. Get 454 Casull only dies. Most of the reloading manuals are going to recommend a small rifle Magnum primer. The Hornady does not recommend Magnum, but most of them do. I always use the Magnum small rifle primers. When in doubt, do what your reloading data tells you, and use reputable reloading data. Don't just go onto bubbashotloads.com and follow what they're saying. Majority of the powders for this case, or for this cartridge, are small ball powders, and they're very slow burning. Like you can see there, got Accurate number 9. It's a good Magnum pistol powder, as well as Accurate 4100. It's also good for Magnum loads in the pistol, as well as shotgun. It's for the 410, so I guess hence the 4100. Other good powders would be the the Alliant 2400, Hodgdon H110, and Winchester 296. Now, because those are slow burning powders, you want to ensure that you get a good heavy crimp on that cartridge. If you're loading lead cast, you want to use a heavy roll crimp. If you're using jacketed bullets like you see there and it has a cantilever, go ahead and use the heavy roll crimp. If you're using bullets that do not have a cantilever, you can use a taper crimp, but the roll crimp is much more effective for this Magnum cartridge. Another reason you want to crimp it is to prevent bullet creep. As the bullets are sitting in that cylinder and you're firing the firearm, the recoil produced by that revolver is enough to make the projectiles creep forward slightly out of the case, and that can lock up the gun. Can have the cylinder lock up where the projectile sticks out far enough so that that revolver cylinder will not revolve. And also it can create a loss of pressure, which will give you squibs. If you look right in front of the trigger guard there, you see the bullet with like a little tip sticking out of it. That's what's left of the cleaning rod. I had one squib and I had to tap it out. I didn't put heavy enough crimps on my reloads, so that projectile right there started creeping out and got a loss of pressure and a squib. So make sure you get a good heavy crimp on there. If you're using that Hornady projectiles there you see on the right, the XTP line, ensure that you get XTP mag, and it will say on the box XTP mag. You can see right there that top one, 300 grain XTP mag, and there on the bottom it just says 250 grain XTP. Alright, the mag XTP has a thicker jacket than just the regular XTP. So that one on the bottom, the 250 grain, save that for your long Colts. And then the 300 grain mag on the top, you can go ahead and use that for your 454 Casull. And then just one final point, like I said, always follow reputable reloading manuals and data. But I've researched that especially with the H110 powder or the Winchester 296 powder, it's very important that you try to select a load that fills at least 90% of the case when the round is seated. so that you can develop enough pressure so that you don't get squibs. Okay, so I'm going to set up to go through the actual process, and we'll get into some of those points I hit more in depth. Stick around. Okay, so when you're setting up your resizing die, usually you want to put your shell holder in, run the ram up, and then you put your die all the way down until it just touches that shell plate, and then lock down that locking ring. However, some manufacturers might be different, so just always follow the instructions that come with your particular set of dies. Okay, so we're going to take our fired cases, and because this is a carbide sizing die, we don't need to lubricate our cases. If it's not a carbide sizing die, you want to go ahead and lubricate your cases. Alright, so we're just running the cases up in there. It's going to resize them, expand the case mouth a bit, and pop out that old primer. So if you guys already know how to reload, this is nothing new to you. But for folks that might be very new to this, we'll just get a minute or so of this. And you can, the expanded primers are come in here into our little primer catcher. So you can see right there, no more primer. Alright, so do a few more of these. The next, we'll go ahead and clean the primer pockets for priming. With this particular cartridge, you want to go ahead and clean out the primer pockets just like you would with a rifle cartridge for a military type arm, one that doesn't have a spring-loaded firing pin to guard against slam fires. With this cartridge in that big revolver, because the recoil is significant, you won't really get a slam fire. It's kind of impossible in a revolver, but the case, if the primer is protruding past the head case enough, or the case head, and during that recoil the round can come back and strike that back part of the revolver where the hammer hits the firing pin and set it off. There is a video on YouTube where a guy shows that. His channel is JR10 Junior 10, all small letters and no spacing. He has a video where that happens to him. Alright, so next I'll show you cleaning the primer pockets, and then we'll measure the cases and make sure that they're within specs, then we'll prime them. Stick around. Okay, there you guys can see the case on the left. The primer pocket has been cleaned, and the case on the right, primer pocket has not been cleaned. Just a little bit of carbon buildup in there from the primer going off. Again, you really don't have to clean it, but I always do it for this case because you want that primer to be seated flush at the very least with the case head, and if not, you want it, or ideally rather, you want it to be just slightly below the case head, maybe 3/1000ths of an inch, just so that that case doesn't come back and set off the primer from the recoil. Okay everyone, we're back. We've got our cases all deep primed and resized. Now we're just going to measure them to make sure that they haven't gone out of specs. So all you got to do is look in your reloading manual and see the dimensions for the case. It'll tell you what the maximum case dimension is. Then you just get your calipers here. You put that cartridge, spent cartridge in there. Right? So for the 454 Casull, it's going to be 1383. That's one right there at 1379. Okay, so that's acceptable. So that's all you do. Take each case and measure it. You don't have to use the calipers if you have a case gauge. It's a little cylinder that you drop the case into. That'll work. Or also like a, I just call this like a template gauge. This little guy right here, and it has the different cartridge is right there. You just put it into where it go. If it fits, it's good. This one though doesn't have 454 Casull. So we got to use the caliper. And I've got them all done. Just got these last three here so you guys can see. Alright, so you just stick it right there in the middle. Close the jaws. Alright, that one's right at 380. Okay, and then you can twist the case, close the jaw again, just to make sure that you're not getting any kind of errors in your reading. Okay, that's right there at 80. 8079. Okay, all these that I just did were between 7.9 and 8.1, so they're within 0.003 of each other. Go ahead and flare your cases as you normally would. Again, all you're doing is putting a little bit of a flare or a bell in the mouth of that case so that it will accept the projectile. If you don't do that, it won't accept the projectile. You might end up deforming or crushing the case a little bit. So if you were to run your finger right there, you'd feel a slight bell or flaring. And usually a rule of thumb, good way to check if you've got the right amount of belling is you just take a case, just set it in there under its own weight. If you turn it upside down, shake it a little bit, and that projectile sticks, you've got the right amount of flaring or belling.